The rain was coming down in sheets, a relentless cascade that blurred the edges of the cityscape. Street lights flickered faintly through the haze, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. In the midst of this dreary scene stood a young woman, no older than 25, cradling her baby close to her chest. Her face was pale but determined, her eyes scanning the crowded bus stop as if searching for something or someone. The weight of her worn-out backpack dug into her shoulder, and she shifted it slightly, trying to balance its contents without disturbing the sleeping child in her arms. She wasn't dressed for the weather. Her thin jacket did little to shield her from the biting cold. Yet despite everything, the exhaustion etched into her features, the dampness seeping through her shoes, there was a quiet strength about her. It was the kind of resilience born not out of choice, but necessity. As the bus finally pulled up, its brakes hissing like an impatient beast, she stepped forward hesitantly. The crowd surged around her, pushing past with careless indifference. Clutching her baby tighter, she made her way inside, finding a spot near the back where she could sit unnoticed. Across the aisle, an older man glanced at her briefly before turning away, shaking his head almost imperceptibly. She didn't notice, or maybe she just didn't care. All she cared about right now was getting home, wherever that might be. The baby stirred slightly, letting out a soft whimper, and she rocked him gently, murmuring soothing words under her breath. For a moment, the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving only the rhythm of their breathing and the hum of the engine. But then, as the bus approached her stop, reality came crashing back. She gathered her things quickly, careful not to wake the baby, and stepped off into the pouring rain once more. The streets here were quieter, lined with buildings that looked tired and forgotten. A neon sign buzzed overhead, casting an eerie glow over the sidewalk. She walked briskly, her boots splashing through puddles, as she headed toward a small convenience store tucked between two larger establishments. Its windows were fogged up, obscuring whatever lay beyond. But she didn't hesitate, pushing open the door. She entered, the bell above it jingling softly in greeting. Inside, the air smelled faintly of stale coffee and plastic packaging. The girl moved to the counter, setting down her bag and pulling out a crumpled bill from her pocket. "Just a bottle of water," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. Over the low hum of the fluorescent lights, the cashier nodded, sliding a bottle across the counter without saying a word. As she reached for it, her gaze drifted toward the shelves behind him, stacked high with essentials she couldn't afford. Diapers, formula, snacks, all things she desperately needed, but knew she couldn't justify spending money on today. Still, she lingered for a moment longer than necessary, as if hoping inspiration would strike and solve all her problems. But life rarely worked that way, especially for someone like her. Outside, the rain showed no signs of letting up. She adjusted the strap of her bag, hoisting it higher onto her shoulder, and began walking again. This time, though her pace was slower, heavier, each step felt like a battle against forces far greater than herself. And then, just as she turned the corner onto another dimly lit street, she saw it, a sleek black car parked illegally by the curb, its engine idling softly. At first, she paid it no mind, assuming it belonged to some wealthy passerby who didn't care about parking rules. But when the rear door opened and a man stepped out, her heart skipped a beat. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that screamed power and authority. His presence commanded attention, even in the grimy something about him made her pause, her instincts screaming at her to keep moving, but curiosity routed her to the spot. The man glanced around, his sharp eyes landing on her almost immediately. There was something calculating in his gaze, as if he were sizing her up, assessing her worth. She instinctively tightened her grip on her bag, feeling suddenly exposed, despite the anonymity of the bustling city. When he started walking toward her, her stomach churned with unease. Who was he? What did he want? These questions raced through her mind, each one amplifying her anxiety. But before she could decide whether to flee or confront him, he spoke. His voice was smooth, authoritative, yet laced with an edge that sent shivers down her spine. "Don't touch that," he said, his words cutting through the noise of the storm like a blade. Her hand froze midair, hovering uncertainly over the strap of her bag. Confusion clouded her expression as she stared at him, unsure of what to say or do next. "What?" she managed to choke out, her voice trembling. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took another step closer, closing the distance between them until they were standing mere inches apart. Up close, she could see the fine lines etched into his face, the gray streaks in his otherwise jet-black hair. He exuded wealth and influence, yet there was something undeniably dangerous lurking beneath the polished exterior. She swallowed hard, clutching her baby closer as if seeking protection from the unknown threat looming before her. "You heard me," he replied, coolly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "That bag doesn't belong to you." His words hit her like a punch to the gut, leaving her momentarily speechless. How dare he accuse her of such a thing? This was her bag, filled with her belongings, things she had painstakingly saved and carried with her through countless hardships. Anger flared within her, momentarily overpowering her fear. "Excuse me," she shot back, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "This is my bag. I don't know who you think you are, but you're wrong." For a split second, she thought she saw a flicker of surprise cross his face, quickly masked by an unreadable expression. But instead of backing down, he simply folded his arms across his chest and studied her intently. "Is that so?" he asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Then tell me, what's inside?" The question caught her off guard, throwing her off balance. She hesitated, her mind racing to recall the exact contents of her bag. Clothes, diapers, a few toiletries. It was nothing extraordinary, certainly not worth making a fuss over. But why was he so insistent? What did he know that she didn't? Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet, flipping it open to reveal an ID card. The name printed on it meant nothing to her, but the title below it sent a chill running down her spine. CEO. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This man wasn't just some random stranger accusing her of theft. He was someone important, someone powerful, someone who could make her life infinitely worse if she didn't tread carefully. Her anger gave way to panic as she realized the gravity of the situation. If he truly believed she had stolen something, she was in serious trouble. Yet deep down, she knew she hadn't done anything wrong. So why did he seem so convinced otherwise? The baby stirred in her arms, breaking the tension-filled silence that had settled between them. Instinctively, she adjusted her hold, cooing softly to soothe him. The man watched the exchange with an unreadable expression, his piercing gaze lingering on the child for a moment too long. Was it pity, curiosity, or something else entirely? She couldn't tell, and that uncertainty only added to her growing unease. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke again. "Look," he said, his tone softer now, almost hesitant. "I'm not trying to cause trouble, but I need to know what's in that bag. It's complicated." Complicated. What did that even mean? Her mind reeled with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Was he hiding something? Had she unwittingly stumbled into something far bigger than herself? She opened her mouth to argue, to demand answers, but stopped short when she noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. Gone was the commanding CEO, replaced by a man who looked almost conflicted. There was a vulnerability in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a hint of something deeply personal lurking beneath the surface. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about a stolen bag, it was about something much deeper, something tied. Two secrets she couldn't begin to fathom. And as much as she wanted to walk away, to put this bizarre encounter behind her and focus on surviving another day, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of something life-changing. "Fine," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can look, but I swear, if you're wasting my time." Her words trailed off, unfinished, as she reluctantly handed over the bag. He accepted it with a nod, his fingers brushing against hers briefly before he turned away. She watched as he unzipped it, his movements deliberate and precise. Every item he pulled out seemed to weigh heavily on him, as if confirming something he already suspected but didn't want to believe. Clothes, bottles, blankets, all ordinary objects, yet they clearly held some significance to him. When he reached the bottom of the bag, his hands stilled, and for a moment, he simply stood there, staring at whatever lay inside. And then, without warning, he closed the bag and turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said simply, his voice carrying a weight that left her breathless. Talk? About what? Her mind raced with unanswered questions, each one pulling her further into a web of mystery she wasn't sure she wanted to unravel. Yet she couldn't deny the pull of curiosity, the nagging sense that this encounter was far from over. As he gestured toward the waiting car, she hesitated, torn between fear and intrigue. What choice did she really have? With the rain still falling steadily around them and her baby resting peacefully in her arms, she took a tentative step forward, unsure of where this journey would lead, but certain that her life would never be the same again. The car's interior was warm, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. The leather seats smelled faintly of polish and wealth, and she couldn't help but feel even more out of place as she settled into the plush back seat. Her baby stirred, again, shifting slightly in her arms, and she instinctively adjusted the blanket around him, her fingers trembling. The CEO sat across from her, his posture rigid, his hands clasped tightly together as if trying to contain some invisible tension. He hadn't said another word since they got into the car, and the silence between them grew heavier with each passing moment. She wanted to ask what was going on, why he had stopped her at the bus stop, and why he seemed so fixated on her bag, but something held her back. Maybe it was the intensity in his gaze, or maybe it was the fear that whatever he was about to say would change everything. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he broke the silence. "Do you recognize any of this?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Without waiting for her response, he reached into the bag and pulled out a small, worn-out photo tucked inside a plastic sleeve. It was faded and creased, as though it had been handled countless times over the years. He held it up for her to see, and her breath caught in her throat. The image showed a young woman holding a baby, standing in front of a modest house. At first glance, it looked like any ordinary family portrait until she realized the woman in the picture bore an uncanny resemblance to herself. No, not just herself, it was unmistakably her. Her younger self, captured in a moment she barely remembered. But how did he have this, and why? Her mind raced as fragments of memory began to resurface. She had been only 18 when her life fell apart. Pregnant, alone, and with no support system to lean on. She'd made choices born out of desperation. She left her hometown behind, severing ties with everyone she knew, including the father of her child, a man whose face she could barely recall now. That decision had come with sacrifices, one of which was leaving behind pieces of her past, including photographs and mementos, or so she thought. Seeing the photo now sent a jolt of panic through her. Had someone been following her all these years, watching her? The questions swirled in her head, making it hard to focus. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice shaking. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her reaction carefully, as if searching for something in her expression. Then, slowly, he leaned back against the seat and let out a long sigh. "This isn't easy for me to explain," he began, his tone softer now, almost hesitant. "But I think it's time you knew the truth." His words hung in the air, heavy, with implication. Truth? What truth? She wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but something about the way he spoke made her pause. There was pain in his voice, raw and unfiltered, and it struck a chord deep within her. Whoever this man was, whatever his intentions, he wasn't here to hurt her. Not directly. Anyway, as the car continued to glide silently through the rain streets, he began to speak. His story unfolded in fragments, disjointed and halting, as though he were piecing it together himself as he went along. He told her about a woman named Claire, the same woman in the photograph, and how she had disappeared without a trace nearly 7 years ago. Claire, it turned out, was more than just a stranger with a similar appearance. She was his daughter, his estranged daughter, whom he hadn't seen since she was a teenager, and the baby in the photo. That baby was hers, her son, presumably, the child sleeping peacefully in her arms right now. The revelation hit her like a freight train, knocking the wind out of her lungs. This man, this powerful, intimidating CEO, was her grandfather. The idea seemed impossible, surreal, yet the evidence was right there in front of her. The photo, the familiarity in his features, the anguish in his voice, it all added up, even if she didn't want to believe it. A million questions flooded her mind at once. Why hadn't Claire ever mentioned him? Why had she run away in the first place? And most importantly, why was he showing up now, after all these years? Before she could process any of it, the car came to a stop outside a towering skyscraper, its glass facade gleaming despite the stormy weather. The driver stepped out to open their door, but neither of them moved. They remained locked in a silent standoff, the weight of unspoken emotions pressing down on them. Finally, he broke the silence. "I know this is a lot to take in," he admitted, his voice tinged with regret, "but I need your help. I've spent years looking for Claire, and I think you might be the key to finding her." Her stomach churned at the thought. Help him, after everything she'd been through, after everything she'd sacrificed to protect her son and carve out a semblance of stability. He expected her to dive headfirst into a mystery that could unravel the fragile life she'd built. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. Yet, as much as she wanted to refuse, to walk away and pretend none of this had happened, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this was bigger than her, bigger than both of them. Reluctantly, she nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. As they stepped out of the car and into the sleek lobby of the building, she clutched her baby tighter, drawing strength from his warmth. The CEO led the way, his movements brisk and purposeful, as if driven by a singular goal. Around them, people bustled about, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine what life might have been like if circumstances had been different, if she had grown up surrounded by privilege instead of poverty, by love instead of abandonment. But those thoughts were fleeting, chased away by the reality of the present. They entered an elevator, its mirrored walls reflecting their mismatched figures back at them. He pressed a button for the top floor, and as the doors slid shut, sealing them off from the outside world, he turned to her once more. "There's something else you should know," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Something about Claire, something dangerous." The words sent a chill running down her spine. Dangerous? What could possibly be dangerous about a missing mother? She opened her mouth to ask, but before she could utter a single syllable, the elevator dinged, signaling their arrival. The doors opened to reveal a sprawling penthouse suite, its opulence overwhelming. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city below, illuminated by the glow of countless lights despite the storm raging outside. But she barely noticed the luxury surrounding her. All she could focus on was the file sitting on the coffee table in the center of the room. It was thin, unassuming, yet it radiated an aura of foreboding. Without a word, He picked it up and handed it to her. "Read this," he instructed, his expression grim, "and then we'll talk." Her hands trembled as she opened the folder, her eyes scanning the contents within. Each page revealed new layers of complexity, pulling her deeper into a web of secrets and lies that stretched far beyond anything she had imagined. By the time she reached the last page, her heart was racing and her mind was reeling. Whatever she had expected, it wasn't this. And as she looked up at him, her lips parted to speak, but unable to form the words. She realized the true extent of the danger they were facing and that they were running out of time. The file in her hands contained more than just information. It held the truth that had been buried for years, waiting to come to light. Each document inside painted a picture of a life she never knew existed. Claire, her mother, hadn't simply run away because of youthful rebellion or fear of responsibility. She had been running from something or someone. The papers revealed a trail of threats, mysterious disappearances, and veiled warnings tied to a powerful corporation, her grandfather's company. As she flipped through the pages, her stomach churned with disbelief. This wasn't just about finding Claire anymore. It was about uncovering a conspiracy that reached far beyond their family. Her grandfather watched her closely, his face etched with guilt and regret. "I didn't know," he said finally, his voice breaking under the weight of his confession. "Not at first. When I found out what they were doing, what my own people were involved in, I tried to stop it. But by then, it was too late. Claire was already gone." His words hung heavy in the air, each one like a punch to the gut. He explained how his company had become entangled with shadowy figures who used its resources for illegal activities, laundering money and silencing anyone who got in their way. Claire, bright and idealistic, had stumbled onto evidence of their crimes while working as an intern. Instead of staying quiet, she had tried to expose them and paid the price by disappearing. The revelation left her reeling. Everything she thought she knew about her past was a lie. Her mother hadn't abandoned her out of selfishness. She had sacrificed everything to protect her. And now, standing here in this luxurious penthouse, she realized the danger hadn't ended. If these people found out she existed, they discovered the baby in her arms, they would come after them too. The stakes were higher than ever, and there was no turning back. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute. For the first time since meeting him, she saw vulnerability in his eyes. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "This is everything," he said, holding it up. "Every piece of evidence Claire gathered before she vanished. It's enough to bring them down if we can get it into the right hands." His plan was risky, almost suicidal, but it was their only chance. They needed to leak the information to the authorities anonymously, ensuring it couldn't be traced back to them. But getting it there would mean navigating a minefield of enemies who wouldn't hesitate to kill to keep their secrets safe. As they formulated a strategy, the tension in the room grew palpable. Every second felt like borrowed time, every decision carrying the potential for disaster. Yet amidst the fear and uncertainty, she found herself drawing strength from the tiny life cradled against her chest. This wasn't just about protecting herself anymore, it was about giving her son a future free from the shadows of the past. With renewed determination, she agreed to help her grandfather see this through. No matter the cost, their escape from the penthouse was a blur of adrenaline moments. Armed guards patrolled the building, alerted by someone within the organization who suspected foul play. Using encrypted phones and burner devices, they coordinated with trusted allies on the outside, piecing together a network of contacts willing to risk everything to take down the corrupt empire. The final leg of their mission took place in a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where they handed over the flash drive to a journalist known for exposing high-profile scandals. It was a tense exchange, fraught with paranoia, but when it was done, she felt a glimmer of hope flicker to life. Weeks passed before the storm broke. News outlets erupted with reports of arrests, indictments, and investigations targeting the highest levels of power. Names were named, scandals exposed, and justice began to claw its way forward. Through it all, she stayed hidden, living quietly in a small town miles away from the chaos. Her grandfather vanished shortly after delivering the evidence, choosing to disappear rather than face the fallout. She understood why Evan admired him for it, but part of her wished he could have stayed long enough to meet his grandson. In the months that followed, she started piecing her life back together. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream of a brighter future, one where she didn't have to constantly look over her shoulder. She even dared to search for Claire, scouring social media and old records for any sign of her mother's whereabouts. Though she hadn't found her yet, she refused to give up hope. Somewhere out there, Claire was alive and maybe, just maybe, she'd return someday to reclaim the family she had fought so hard to protect. The story ended not with fireworks or fanfare, but with quiet resilience. Sitting on the porch of her modest home, watching her son play in the yard, she reflected on how far they'd come. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was hers. Hers to shape, hers to cherish, and hers to fight for. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the landscape. She smiled softly, knowing that sometimes the greatest victories are the ones that go unseen.